Hey Hannah,
Hello. How's it going?
good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so today, we're gonna talk all about, a common ground between us is that we're trying to just help people, some of them to help them get out of pain, some people to achieve even greater goals, even beyond pain. And so the main kind of driving piece of it is fascia, but we're going to talk about how we incorporate both our practices. So, if you wouldn't mind kind of introducing yourself, tell us about you, about what you do professionally.
Totally, yeah. So I am in the work of yoga. Specifically, I'm a yoga therapist, but there's many different rooms within the house of yoga and yoga therapy that I work in. So it looks like some people are saying they can't hear us clearly. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you. Yes, I can.
It says audio is off from you.
Okay. So, Noel, can you plug it in? All right. You can keep introing yourself, and we're gonna fix my
Sounds
piece.
great. Okay, beautiful. Yeah, so I work under the house of yoga, but within that realm of yoga, specifically yoga therapy, a lot of somatic work, and then I'm diving really deeply into psychosomatic work and understanding the different layers of how our nervous system is deeply integrated in our everyday lives, and how the better we know ourselves and the better we know our nervous systems, the better we can move forth with greater power and self-reclamation for our own health and our own healing.
So then, let me ask you this: how do you achieve that? So can you actually break down then yoga as a pure uninterpreted form, and then like your
Mm,
interpretation of that and how you utilize it, part of what else you do?
totally, yeah. So yoga in and of itself is a very ancient practice that was really less physical, like 90% non-physical before it ever really became dominantly physical, especially within our modern realm.
Really?
Yeah, it was mostly like 5,000 years ago, you go back and it was like hieroglyphics and these ancient texts, kind of, even if you were to study, some of the ancient yoga scriptures, it talks about yoga as a way of being more than yoga as this very physical practice. Yet in the West, we meet it from this super physical realm. And mostly people only associate yoga with flexibility and these certain postures or asanas that we see people post online or see in a
Yeah,
yoga studio. It's
I
kind of
never knew
crazy.
that. Never knew
So
that.
it's so important because once we understand that yoga is actually much more of a all-encompassing holistic practice, we're able to understand that the idea of it is to come home to yourself. The idea of it is to cultivate more calm. And one of the first like sutras or threads of yoga, the second sutra, talks about the whole practice of yoga is to cultivate a sense of calm in your body. So if
Mm,
you're not getting there, there's probably a disconnect along the path that you are practicing or the embodiment that you have in connection to yoga as
mm,
a holistic practice and not just this heavily physical practice, which it is and can be. So it's
mm,
very multifaceted. And my interpretation of yoga and the way that I have, connected to it and embodied it has been through a very spiritual realm, but also I would say a very scientific realm, hence yoga therapy being my kind of force that I move through the world with, because it's both, you know, anatomical and physical, and we're getting into the nervous system, into the fascia, and into all these layers of our physical being, but we're also super focused on how our, you know, the psychosomatic connection of it all. So how we are influenced by our emotions, or how our lifestyles are influencing our practice. So it's very specific to the person. It's very specific to what everyone needs, and everybody needs something different. And so
mm.
the way I've connected to it for myself is like every single day I wake up different. So every single day I need something different, and my practice changes based off of my needs day in and day out.
Wow. So it's amazing how much more customizable and like up for interpretation it can be beyond what I'm sure many people, I shouldn't say most, I don't want to make an assumption, but many people may be actually experiencing. Like I know, for example, when I used to go to a yoga studio, I was never I was never I would never say I was barely an intermediate with yoga. But I would go time to time, maybe once a week or a couple times a month. And then I had kids and it started being, hey, I have 25 minutes. I'm going to go downstairs and like
Mm,
just put a YouTube video on. But that felt more at that point, and there's not that there's nothing, it's not a problem with the virtual piece of it, it's the way I was doing it.
mm.
It really just turned into stretching.
Yeah.
It was just I was sitting there, I had, like, a clock going, like, my body was barely warmed up, and I was like, "I just need to get these in,"
Mm.
which is probably a big departure from, and then there's effectiveness to that. There's effectiveness to stretch to doing full
Totally.
body but it's a departure from what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's much more it's something that I always say is because people will say, um, like, "Isn't yoga just stretching? Isn't yoga just to get more flexible?" Or people will say they can't do yoga because they're not flexible. And I'm like, funny enough,
Mm,
the whole idea of yoga is not just to be physically flexible, but mentally responsive and flexible. So
mm,
it's a very like bridging together the duality of our existence, and it's a very
mhm,
integrative practice. And the more that you can understand the depth that it has to offer, it also becomes a practice of self study. And I think that's
mm,
honestly the biggest gift is the more somatic awareness you have, the better you're able to integrate that off the mat. And 90% of where yoga is happening is off the mat. It's not when you're on your mat doing these postures, which again, they can be great for stretching, for strength building, for a
mhm,
whole plethora of reasons. But the true yoga or the invisible yoga is what's happening when you're out in the world, when
mm,
you're, wanting to react to something, but instead you build the awareness to then respond to it. And that's where
mhm,
nervous system healing comes in, and even fascia comes in. So it's all very much, you know, connected together. And I think that's a part of the work that I try to do is I think decolonizing yoga and bridging together Western bodies and Eastern minds, because
mhm,
the philosophy behind yoga is so potent, and also the mechanics and the biomedical aspects of it are also so important. And when we can bring them together, that's when we actually find the wholeness. No part of you can be whole if you're constantly separating something out of it. So it allows us to bring the holistic presence to ourselves and to our lives, and therefore it can access so much more depth in our healing and in our transformation.
So, looking at your Instagram, which is how I found you, it's very apparent the difference, and, like, everything is very aligned with what you're saying. Like, when I look at your page, you are 100% embodying this piece of it. Like,
Thank
and
you.
you don't shy away from it at all. That's one of the first thing I noticed. I was like, "Oh, wow, she's all in on this," and, like, she's putting herself out there, not just, like, the things she's saying, but, like, the way she's moving her body, the post, like, the energy, it all is completely aligned.
Hmm.
So, it makes so much sense when you talk about your practice in that way, and that you're and just my interpretation of what you're saying, the actual poses, the sessions are like a training ground for what you can then take on and use mentally throughout the rest of your life. But is there
Totally.
also like, I would say that there's like two ways that I would look at that. The first piece is, um, if you were doing like any kind of therapy, and then like you learn these strategies and it's like, all right, now go apply these or else this is worthless. But is it also that when you finish a session, that not without even having to like remember to apply things, they're supposed to be like just like a drip effect that's just like you've opened something and then it just continues to flow until like your
Hmm.
next session, you know?
Yes, I think that's the goal. Like, that's our goal as teachers, is to inspire you to want to come back and to inspire you to want to actually take the tools and integrate them off of the mat. And I mean, that's my biggest goal as a teacher is like I want people to not just have an incredible experience on the mat in their practice, but I want there to be some trigger in their mind or in their body. And often that's something that I obviously can't produce for anyone. I have to create the facilitation, or I have to create a safe space for that to be discovered. But yes, that's truly what I'm so passionate about, is when I see my students then take this off their mat and actually start to even bring like 5 minutes of breath work into their day, or little
Mhm.
bits of meditation, or even hearing the way that they talk about things. When that starts to shift, that's when I know, okay, your yoga is coming off your mat with you. And then it
Mhm.
ignites some fire underneath them to realize, oh my gosh, like I'm the greatest teacher, not me, Hannah, but
Mhm.
them to themselves.
Mhm.
Like you are your own greatest healer, you are your own greatest guide, you are your own greatest teacher. And when that switches in your mind of like, oh my gosh, it's not the yoga, it's the space that yoga creates and the bridge that it takes you back home to yourself, that then makes people want to come back, because they're so lit up by, whoa, I have the power to create that experience within myself. And yoga is just the pathway, it's an access point, but it's not
Mhm.
an end point. You are the actual living laboratory, of life in your own body, in your own mind. And so your mat is a part of that process. um, but I definitely, yeah, want them to be able to come back to their mats, and that's through their own self discovery and work.
That makes a lot of sense. That's kind of the same way that I operate, um, with what I show on social media, with people I work with. You're the teacher, and if someone comes in with the mentality of like, I'm gonna go to this place, this person's going to heal me. Like I show up, lay down, all right, do your thing. All right, am I better now? That never works.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a very, very, very acute thing that was gonna get better anyway. But, like, when you need to actually make a fundamental change, a lot of people aren't at that point, though, right? So, like, sometimes you get people who are just realizing that they have a problem, like, "I'm gonna come in and do this." But when there's that piece that either they realize on their own or that you teach them, that, like, "Hey, you're gonna actually have to take this on, like, and figure this out with me," and they're like, "Oh, okay, I'm not ready for that. That's way too much." But then once they hit a point of enough either suffering or dysfunction, or they can't like achieve the goals they want, then they get to the point where like, oh, so now what they said actually isn't so crazy. I guess I do need to do this. And it takes a while to get to that point. But once you do get to that point, those are the people who actually like can achieve their goals. Like so ultimately
Yeah.
you're just teaching them and then they have to implement it. And like it just takes everyone's on their own timeline to get to that point.
Totally. You have to want to change in order to change. And I mean, especially within the coaching work that I do, it's like I could coach anyone, but if they don't want to be coached, then it's never going to work. It's not going to be something that is supportive for them. You can read a self help book over and over and over again, but if you don't
Yes.
want to change and you don't want to actually take the offerings from that book and integrate them or try them or experiment with them, then you end up missing out on the whole point of that book, the whole point of the
Hmm.
practice. So it's, yes, there's a huge element of that. It's like you have to have the personal desire, or what you said is huge. Like you get to that point where you almost are so fed up with being sick or whatever it is, or so fed up with the chronic pain, or so fed up with meeting that suffering, that you then are forced to change and forced to want to change.
Yes. 100%. So getting a little more specific, what outside of so we've established like approach. What about just practice or like even if we transition to like the fascia piece of it, like fascia being a tissue that engulfs all of the tissues within the body, the muscles, the ligaments, the joints, the tendons. How does is that impacted through what you do?
Yeah. So I like to talk about fascia too as like a sensory organ, because I think, when I first learned about fascia, I learned about it being a connective tissue, and everyone was talking about fascia.
Mhm.
Um, but especially in yoga, like yoga teachers would talk about it and say, "Oh, you might experience emotions in this pose," and like relate it back to fascia, but they would never actually talk about why, or like the interconnectedness. And often, where I feel like fascia is integrated into the world of yoga is through the nervous system. Obviously, the physical element of yoga, fascia is very dynamic and it's responsive, and it lengthens and it shortens and it remodels based off
Mhm.
of your movement, based off of pressure, based off of hydration. And these yoga poses that we do, especially if you're like holding them,
Mhm.
they create this like sustained tensile like loading on your
Mhm.
different fascial planes. And so that can already help to build like resiliency in your fascia or improve, elasticity, all of that. But the part that I think is the coolest is the fact that we have nerve endings that are interconnected in your fascial planes, and
Mhm.
your ability to react or respond lies within your fascia. And at least
Mhm.
I like to think so, based off of my understanding of it. So if we, are holding tension in a part of our body, and all of us do to some degree, like we're in a very interesting world. And so our
Mhm.
body is responding to the world and responding to the influences on our nervous system. And then it holds those responses in the fascia. And then
Mhm.
when you go to your mat and you step on your mat for a yoga practice or wherever you are, you can do it at home, anything, and you start to stretch, and you start to move your body and open the fascial planes, you might start to notice the impact on your nervous system. Maybe, you start to feel emotions, or maybe you start to experience, different shifts in the body or in your energy, your electromagnetic field, that then open you up to being like, wow, I can breathe again, or I feel more alive, or I feel more connected, or I feel more at peace. And so it's very integrated into the goal of yoga with accessing more calm. The
Mhm.
more we understand our fascia, the more we understand how our nervous system is tied to the fascia, and that, the way that we react to the world around us, or either get to or don't get to finish out our nervous system responses, then impacts the way that we hold ourselves. And you can see it on people all the time. I see people who walk into yoga with chest open, and they're like ready, and they're soft and supple, and then people who are walking in with their shoulders up here and their chest is kind of hollowed in, and maybe they got some kyphosis, rounding in the upper back, because they're holding, storing all this tension, all this emotion, all this stress in their body. And then when they start to move through the shapes and the poses and the breath work, some of that starts to relax or
Mhm.
release.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think an important, like, distinction for that is that historically, people have always thought, and you get taught this also, that, the muscle itself is tight, and the muscle does have this function. There are trigger points in muscles
Totally.
which it cannot be oxygenated, and so we need to open that so that it gets more oxygenated. If a muscle is short for too long, it actually physically can no longer stretch. So there's definitely dysfunction within muscle.
Mm-hmm.
But what initially determines if a muscle is going to be tight or relaxed is the nervous system. That's where the signals come from. So if this muscle wants to be tight, the nervous system has to tell it to be tight. If it wants to be relaxed,
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes if someone has a tight muscle right here and all they focus on is just pulling it, pulling it, pulling it, and it feels good because there's receptors in there called mechanoreceptors, and when they move, it feels good. You're actually, it's
Mm-hmm.
recognizing the stretch. But if when you stop, the nervous system is still sending that signal there, tightens back up. So
Mm-hmm.
really, really addressing the nervous system is such a big piece of it. Now that could come from something like simpler, like muscle imbalances. So for example, if there's agonist and antagonist muscles. So like if I want to contract my biceps, the triceps, which makes my arm straight, has to relax, or else if they both contract, you're just like stuck in the middle. So if there are imbalances, like this muscle's extra tight, this one's always going to be in a lengthened state. Or if this one can't contract and it's always in a lengthened state, you're going to have more tension in this one. And so
Mm-hmm.
finding out the balances and relationships between the shoulders and hips and necks and all that is a piece of it. But also, like, having um, memories of pain. So your body's trying to protect you and it's constantly tensing up those muscles to protect you. Emotional issues as well. Like if you see someone who is just no trauma, very confident, always told they're the best, at the top of their game, they walk around, their chest is out, they just look comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see someone who has just been like kind of like beaten down and lacks the confidence and in a bad place, that position, sometimes we think of it as like, oh, your pec muscle is too tight, but it can be just the nervous system again in a protective mode.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start explaining like the way that you practice and yoga and the way it's meant to be, it makes sense that you need to connect it all together to have that lengthening effect. And like when it comes to fascia, you know, it's the biggest systemic piece of our biomechanics. It
Mm-hmm.
pulls everything into directions. There's lines on the back that pull you back. There's lines in the front that pull you forward. There's lines that rotate you. And, you know, in my world, if someone has a dysfunction or a pain in a specific region, we do always start at the source because we know that irregardless of the driving root cause issue, if there is a restriction here and it's very limited and we can get things back into a better position, then we're going to actually get things in a healthier state so that you can move normally. But then if we don't zoom out and look at the driving causes, you fall back to it. So
Totally.
yeah, so for like people watching who are like, well, you know, my main thing is just neck pain on the left side and headaches, but I read all the I just put out a posture video about this last week. Like I read all these different things. Like, is it like my pelvic floor? Is it my foot? Is it my hip? Like, where do I start? Just to keep it simple, like we start at the source
Mm,
where let's just start determining how to get you into a better position to open up these nerves that are producing the headaches, because that your pain generators, the thing that's actually activating the pain sensation is generally right at the site. So
mm,
I try to go in there, get the pain to calm down, but then we start looking at lifestyle, nervous system
mhm.
and neuroplasticity, and then biomechanics of the whole body, and how is that creating that loop that might drive you right back there again. So that's just like a little different, like the way that I address it, but also just how the systems work. Like you can
Yeah.
operate small or you can operate large.
Yeah, I love that, and I think they're so necessary. It's necessary to have all of that, because, there is something to be said about addressing where you are experiencing the pain, and even
Hmm.
from that, there can be so much success that happens from learning to relax that part or getting it worked on. And then the part that I think is really fascinating that you talked about is how different parts of our body can trigger fascial tension in another part of our body. Like your
Yeah.
foot can be storing tension that's connected to your hamstring, or it could be connected to your neck. Like the interconnectedness of it all, I think, is really beautiful. And I see that a lot on your page, and I've done some of the exercises on there myself, and have experienced that sense of relief. And then the part that you're talking about connected to the nervous system and our lifestyle, that's a lot of the work as a yoga therapist that I'm looking at, is how is someone living, and of course what's happened in their past, because I think it can be influential to understand that, especially through like the psychosomatic realm. Like if there were things that have happened that have caused some sort of response in your nervous system that is maybe maladaptive and has caused you to continue to live in a certain way, where you're now contracting that fascia in that specific area over and over again, or it's getting triggered by something. um, but yeah, it's huge to understand that the fascia is connected to like emotional centers in our brain, and that when we are tapped into our nervous systems, which has been the most transformative work for me in this last year of life, is understanding my nervous system and understanding how to maybe complete some of the responses that I didn't get to complete in terms of like the sympathetic nervous system or the sympathetic response, your fight or flight mode,
Hmm.
where when we get triggered or when we experience something that triggers an emotion and we don't get to express that emotion then gets repressed. And we're often like, okay, well, where does that go? Where does that
Yeah.
repressed emotion go in the body? It's not in our lymph, it's in our fascia. And I think that
Hmm.
people were getting angry. I saw it a lot online. It's like, your emotions are not stored in your body. They're not stored in the body. But
Yeah.
it's the response or your inability to respond that is stored in the body. And you can see it. You can see the way that people are holding themselves in the posture, or you can feel it. You can actually
Hmm.
sense it in your body, which can, if you're continuing to hold in a pattern with your fascia over time, that becomes inflammation, and you're creating an inflammatory pattern of, a way that you maybe shouldn't be. So then when you start
Hmm.
to work on that fascia, or start to open that line of fascia, or go to the source of it in the psyche and understand, why do I continuously, experience this emotion, or haven't experienced this emotion, and now it's being manifested somewhere in the body, you can go to like that root cause that you're talking about, and
Yeah.
hit it not just from the body, but also from the psychological standpoint. And I think that's the bridge of the worlds of psychosomatic work, of integrative healing, and of yoga therapy, that allow people to go a little bit deeper into all the different realms.
Yeah. I love it. And I think, to kind of simplify the piece of where the memories are stored, I think it's easier to think of the easiest way to think about it is our entire body is fueled by electrical impulses. And so
Mhm.
sometimes you smell something, and I smelled an air freshener last week, and it's so this is gonna sound weird, but like every like 5 or so years, I'll smell this air freshener. It's like a some type of lemon scent, and it brings me right back to something, and I can't pinpoint. I
Mhm.
know it's like high school or college, and this has been going on for like 20 years now. Where every now and then I smelt it again this weekend. I was like, "Ah," but I just can't get close to the memory.
Hmm.
But the thing is, like, each of our senses pull us. They open up memories sometimes. You hear something, it brings you back somewhere. You smell something, you see
Totally.
something, right? And that's because, I mean, yes, we have the emotional centers, the memory centers in our brain. We have the emotional memory centers of our brain, but it's all connected through electrical activity. And
Yeah.
so to understand that if the different ways nerves are firing up and down from our senses bring out memories, our physical body is and touch is one of the five sensations. And so to
Mhm.
understand that the receptors and the movements throughout the body can somehow stimulate a memory is not far-fetched. Now, whether that memory is like actually in the brain or
Right.
stored in who knows, really, we just don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But to understand that like a certain movement or nerve impulse that's responsible for anything in the body can somehow connect to memory, that is to me like a very simple concept that we've already established a long time ago. And so whatever is accessing those memories, like I guess the theory comes to just allowing your body to activate them and to work through those trigger areas. Like in a very simple form, if when I bend, just like if someone has a movement that every time they do it, it triggers jaw, neck pain, headaches, or dizziness,
Hmm.
most of the time I have this saying part of my group, which is go towards the pain,
Mm.
where we want to say, okay, that created a flare up, we're going to back it down, we're going to manipulate the variables around it, like the intensity, the frequency, and the duration of how we go towards it, and let's go towards it again, because that's like a compass,
Mm.
it's telling you something is here. And yes, of course, there are cases when there's an actual restriction that we should not do that or it's not going to work, but your body will let you
Right.
know. So you build through it, and more times than not, suddenly the person can do that movement again because their
Mm.
nervous system has realized it's not a physical threat, and I was being
Right.
overprotective and there was tension. So to understand that, like if for some reason when you bent your elbow, you had some type of memory activated or something that caused discomfort in your body, to understand that trying to move through it more would help, to me is a very intuitive thought.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it sounds actually very similar what you're saying of like go towards the pain. We don't necessarily use that same verbiage, but in yoga therapy, often we tease into the areas above or around it. So where if someone's having pain in their right hip, often we're also looking at what's connected to that area, the quad and the hamstring and the glute and the maybe transverse abdominis and parts of the pelvis and the pelvic floor. Like we're looking at every possible surrounding
Right.
area as well and kind of teasing into those
Mm.
areas so that we're getting towards the area of concern without just like what you're saying, where we're not like just going to forcefully cause pain on the
Yeah.
body. But often what happens is when you start to work into those surrounding areas, the pain starts to release in the area
Mhm.
of concern, and it's cool to see how that compounds over time. And then people are like, oh yeah, I don't even know what happened or why I had that pain or where that pain was coming from. And I myself have had that experience too, what you're talking about with air fresheners. I had that
Yeah.
with perfume, that it smelled like someone, and I had like a visceral reaction of like, ooh, and my body got tense. And now, back then I didn't have the understanding that I do now to have like supported myself. Oh, I got tense. Now I need to make sure I actually like move my body and release that tension and
Mhm.
ground myself and calm my nervous system. But before it
Right.
was like, oh, I feel tense. And then I keep living like in this tension versus now I have
Yeah.
the understanding and the awareness to be like, okay, there's some interoception happening. I can see how my body's shifting, but now I'm having this other experience of I need to respond to that. Otherwise, it's going
Mm.
to continue to full like layer on top of itself, and that's when pain becomes chronic too. I had chronic back pain for 8 years, eight
Mm.
years of chronic back
Wow.
pain. I saw so many conventional medicine doctors. I had gotten surgical shots. I was in and out of the hospital from like 13 till 20. And I
Wow.
remember feeling so confused and so lost. And I tried everything. I even went and saw a psychologist who did like cognitive behavioral therapy work
Yeah.
and didn't do anything. I was like at a loss for understanding. So I stopped all of it and I decided to become my own doctor. And what my regimen was every single day was 40 minutes of meditation, which I give or take now, I would shift things around, but it was like, I'm going to sit for 40 minutes and have to actually sit with my pain. So I had to
Mm,
acknowledge that I was in pain and then actually breathe into it and be with it and like accept it as a part of me. And I didn't know that I was doing that like emotional work that was also softening my fascia through my mind, telling my body that it was safe. And then on
right.
top of that, I would do like different strength training and gentle yoga movements and hold yoga postures for a long time. Within a year of doing that, my back pain was completely gone. Like
That's
it was
amazing.
insane. And I remember thinking to myself, I walked back into my doctor's, the one who told me he was like, I don't know if you're going to be able to walk by 21. I was 21 and I was like, not only am I walking, but I'm healed. And it wasn't, this is not to shame conventional medicine at all. It has
Yeah.
a purpose and a place and it's so necessary.
Yeah.
And it's not the only answer. So
Hmm.
I've experienced that for sure within my own life.
I love that. First of all, that's amazing because that takes so much discipline to actually do that. It's time consuming and you don't even know
Yeah,
if
it
it's
was
going to
hard.
pay off. Yeah. But again, you hit that level, that
Yeah.
desperation level. Um, yeah, it's interesting when you take a thought, you know, it all of our thoughts are tied. There's beliefs tied to all of our experiences, I guess, what we experience, and
Mhm.
we've determined which ones are bad and what you should fear and what you should not fear
Mhm.
and what's good. But sometimes if you actually just examine the thought, it it loses its identity a little bit, and then
Mhm.
you kind of can place a different kind of identity on it. And it reminds me of just really anything. Like anytime you go to get into something new, even here with my business, it's like when I'm like, oh, I need to start doing this. I'm like, but what is this all about? And I try to learn it. I'm like, oh, this is a nightmare. And then like you stick to it for a couple months, and you're like, oh, that thing, yeah, that's easy. I got that in my mind and repeat now. And
Totally.
so it just, I mean, and that's what fear is, right? It's like fear is the unknown. So once you actually sit with the thought and examine it, and then sometimes that fear is rooted in something real, and then you realize that and you say, okay, like this is serious, but you have to actually, examine it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. What just came to me was like fear is a feeling too, and feelings are like the language of our body, the way that our body communicates, while like thoughts are the language of our brain and how the
Mm,
brain communicates. And when we're able to understand like how our thoughts impact our beliefs, which are connected to our feelings, it's like this whole system is working together. And that's why I think the body and the mind together is just the most intelligent system. And when we're able to understand that interconnectedness, like the
mhm,
fascia, weaving through everything, in and around everything, the better we're able to know how we can influence our mind, which then influences our feelings. And, you talked about us being these like electromagnetic beings. And that's very much rooted in our feelings, how we feel, the vibrational frequency at which we are vibrating at is a
mm,
part of our healing journey and is a part of our inner awareness of self, but also, to get a little metaphysical with it, a part of the way that we are attracting healing into our space or inviting it into our space. And I think that goes into our ability to surrender and to notice that even if we have fear, it's okay to have fear. Everyone experiences fear. But when the fear becomes the repetitive theme of feeling in your body, it then can lead towards chronic experiences because
mhm,
it's like a repetitive cycle that's happening.
right.
And that's
It's
when,
not useful. It's not
right,
useful anymore.
totally. Yeah,
Um, so in terms of, because I feel like we could riff on this like all
totally.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to now bring it back. In terms of practice, yoga
Yeah.
practice and poses and ways to really, especially for people just starting out. I don't know. Any advice that you have with like types of yoga or poses or ways to get through the most with the least amount of effort and least amount of repercussions in the beginning, like just for anyone who's in this situation, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
around all that?
Yeah, I have a lot of them, but I'll
Yeah, I know it's a
condense
very big
it.
question. Just
Yeah.
think more starting point, I guess.
Yeah, I think starting point, if you're specifically looking to get into the fascia and that specifically, I would go towards yin yoga because it allows you to really hold postures for longer than 90 seconds. And the longer you're in the pose, the more the fascia softens.
Mm,
So that can be a really supple practice for people who are wanting to maybe get into yoga but don't want to do the power vinyasa. To be honest, most of us probably need more of the restorative and calmer yogic practices, and yin is one that like stokes the sympathetic nervous system at the start because
mm,
sensations can be a lot for people, but then it slowly kind of moves people into this parasympathetic state. The longer that you hold the posture, the more that you connect to your breath, and it
mm,
gives you this space to actually feel the sensations and feel if emotions are coming up, and kind of let them come up to come out. So I would say yin for sure for anyone who's looking to get started, or for even advanced practitioners where like I want to kind of go back to the root.
yeah,
Um, Breath is also huge. I think one of the most simple things that we all can do every day is breathe with more intention. And it sounds simple. It sounds, your breath is something that's involuntary. It's just going on the whole day. But I think we often, especially when we're experiencing stress, we can then start to like tense the body, tense the fascia, and the breath
yeah,
also is a part of that. So if we
mhm,
can breathe deeper and longer, especially on our exhales, which is connected to the parasympathetic response, we then allow ourselves to down regulate and calm the body down. So simple technique that anyone can do: 4 counts in, 4 count hold, 8 counts out. You just keep
mm,
going 4 counts in, 4 count hold, 8 counts out. You can do it anywhere at any time, eyes
I
open or
like that.
closed. And it's so simple, and it's specifically going to be a down regulator,
Mm,
and help with getting the diaphragm to move. My one thing that I have to add in here is just notice that you're not breathing up, because often we breathe vertically and then we cause
yeah,
more tension, versus I'll take my hands to my ribs, especially the low ribs, and focus on the breath moving out and down versus
mhm,
in and up, because that can just kind of enhance the tension versus
yeah.
relax and soften.
Yeah, okay, I like that. The 8 seconds out. I mean, that's a long exhale,
It
but
is.
but it's I understand the effectiveness of that, and it's just as really as far as you can get into it, with the
Yeah,
goal
you
being
can
8.
yeah, you could do, I mean, if it's however long you can make your exhale, as long as you can make it, that's key. Typically, what I've noticed with people is that it's achievable. 8 is pretty achievable and 4 is pretty accessible for the inhale, but if you're breathing at like a 2 or 3 count inhale and exhale, which is it's a shallow breath, but a lot of people are, then
Mhm,
start there. Start with 2 to 3 seconds in, maybe 5 seconds out, and really
mhm.
just extend the exhale longer than your inhale.
So, in terms of forms of yoga, and you can kind of, after my question, like, go into what you practice, or I'm sure it's like a mix of, your own kinda thing that you figured out, but just maybe just going off, like, the most mainstream forms, and you already said, like, yin versus vinyasa, like, are there other ones? Like, I'm sure people are very confused and, like,
Yeah.
intimidated. Like, are there other ones that you think that you should just touch on, and, like, just to kinda break down the styles, and then maybe
Yeah.
go into, like, what you practice, and or what you found most helpful?
Totally, yeah. So yin is going to be the most cooling, the one that I already talked about. Vinyasa or power vinyasa is a more like modern adaptation of hatha yoga, and vinyasa is like a flow class. So you're moving one
Mm,
posture to the next posture to the next posture, and often there's a lot of balancing poses and strength involved. So
yeah.
it's a more rigorous practice, and that's the one that people often say is exercise, which
That's like with,
it
like,
is.
warrior 1, warrior 2,
Yes,
you're
warrior.
rotating, you're coming, like, all that, like,
Yes.
elbow to knee and reach up. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is 100% a workout.
Yes, it's intense. It's a
Yeah,
workout and a work in. It's a lot all at once, but
yeah,
it's for the right people, it can work amazing. It's not
mhm,
not every style of yoga is for everyone, and I think that's a huge misconception is like there's one way, there's not one way. If you're someone who's interested in hatha yoga or like moving slower, hatha yoga would be a perfect practice because it's similar poses but much slower pace. And it's not necessarily easy
Mhm.
because you hold the poses for a while, but it's steady and it's a little bit smoother and there's not as much fast paced movement with it. And
Okay.
then there's, I mean, there's so many lineages. I will just say
You
Ashtanga
don't have to,
yoga,
yeah.
if you're feeling crazy and fiery, that's like vinyasa
Really?
on blast. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's like the main kind of the main ones you'll see, especially in the Western world. But I'll say my favorite type of yoga, and no one probably would expect this unless you follow me
Uh-huh.
on Instagram, is yoga nidra. And
Okay.
this nidra is the word for sleep in Sanskrit. And so it's a type of practice where you lay down, and I make it extra cozy with like a PMEF mat and a pillow under my knees and an eye pillow,
Mhm.
all that. You don't need it to be that crazy, but you essentially lay in a pose on your back called Shavasana for 20 minutes to 60 minutes. And it's a guided meditation called non sleep deep rest. And it gets you so deep into your parasympathetic nervous system that the brain wave you often enter is called theta, which is like
Mhm.
your space of imagination and deep restoration and hypnosis. I do it every single day without fail, and it has absolutely transformed my sleep. It's transformed my nervous system. It is literally the only reason right now I think why I'm able to handle so much, and my resiliency towards stress has increased because I've carved out space for deep, deep rest.
So, can you tell me again the name of that and when do you apply it? And like how long, what time of day, how frequently?
Yeah, it's called yoga nidra. It's become kind of a hot topic, I feel like, in the medical world recently. You can do 20 minutes of it. You could do 10 minutes of it, but there was a study that came out that was like 20 to 30 minutes of yoga nidra a few times a week can make up for like 2 to 3 hours lost of deep sleep. And
Mm.
so I started doing this practice when I was struggling with insomnia and when I was like having just like, even with travel, when I'm traveling a lot and my sleep
Mhm.
patterns are starting to get off, I'll do it. And you can do it any time of day. Like if I wake up and I'm really tired, I might do like a 20-minute practice before I even
Mhm.
start my day to help reset. But I consistently do this, like, after my next calls this afternoon, I'll do it mid-afternoon. Before I go into the rest of my day, I'll probably do, like, a 30-minute one, and that's my kind of bread and butter, like, every single day, 20 to
Really?
30 minutes in the afternoon to reset. If I really need more, I'll do more.
Um what so cuz we're going to wrap up soon, but I have
Yeah,
some more
yeah.
questions. But I just want
Yeah.
to, what are your thoughts, you know, sometimes I'll take some type of rest break during the day, even if it's like 5 minutes or like 8 minutes, and I don't even fall asleep. I just, close my eyes,
Yeah.
micro napping. And
Mhm.
sometimes I want to meditate, but then I find myself craving sleep more. Like I'll sit
Mm,
there starting to meditate, starting to get into like producing energy, and I just feel like my body just wants to totally shut off.
mm.
What are your thoughts around that and like pros and cons and just in general?
Yeah, I think if you're going for one thing, commit to that one thing fully. So if it's gonna be
Mhm.
sleep, then give yourself, 15 minutes of an actual nap or rest, and then
Yeah.
maybe do like a little bit of breath work to create some fire when you wake up.
Mhm.
If you're gonna do yoga nidra, fully commit to doing yoga nidra. Often I don't feel groggy when I'm coming out of yoga nidra, but it's because the guide will take you up and out of the practice. In the same way that if you were to do a hypnosis, you have a guide who takes you out of the state so that you're not living in theta brain
Yeah.
state and
Yeah,
feeling all
definitely.
like,
Can't
where
do
am
that all
I?
day. Yeah.
Right. So it kind of brings you back up. And again, if you wake up feeling groggy, that's when I know, okay, I need to do some like sympathetic breath work to stoke my nervous system and like get back online.
Mhm.
And then, on the other hand, if you want the meditation, do a 10-minute meditation and notice how you feel. Like I would play around with it. And you'll start to know what feels resonant for your body and for your day. If you end up doing yoga nidra and you're like, no, I can't do that midday because I'm going to want to stay there, then maybe it's just a 10-minute meditation. Like anything you can do to pause and decrease stimuli in the middle of
Yeah.
your day, especially to like reset yourself, you're setting yourself up for more success. So whether it's an 8-minute nap or a 10-minute meditation or 20 minutes of nidra, it's unique to whatever it is you need, but they're all going to be beneficial one way or another. It's just what resonates for you and your practice. And I think for me, nidra has been that key, but I would say my best advice is to try, like play around
Yeah.
with it and become curious and then just note how you feel. Oh, I feel really good. Oh, I feel really tired. And
Yeah.
take that information, take that data and utilize it as simply that, just data to understand how to then choose going
Yeah.
forward.
That makes sense. I mean, that's basically the same way that my same philosophy. It's sometimes there's not a right or wrong, but we just need a starting point.
Yeah,
And you're in data collection mode, and it's like we need your starting point. Don't get too hung up. Like, what's the absolute best approach for me? Just do something, and then like, once your body gives you your response,
totally.
like you make your adjustment, and you make enough of those adjustments, and then you get to where you're trying to go.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
where are you? So where are you based out of? Or do you work virtually? Like, how do
Yeah,
you
I'm
practice?
virtual. It's so funny because everyone always asks me, they're like, "Where are you in the world?"
Yeah, because
And
your posts look like you're all over.
yeah, I am all over, and I'll be all over pretty much for the rest of the year. I'll be out in Asia for the rest of the year,
Okay.
but right now I'm based in the US, and most of my practice and the things that I offer are online at the moment. I'm
Okay.
transitioning to all of it being online, so
Yeah.
this is kind of the realm that I exist on the most right now.
Okay, cool. So people know where to find you.
Yeah,
Um, this was great. This was an amazing Instagram live, and it's actually streaming everywhere right now. We covered a ton in 45 minutes, so I feel like we started wide and then
yeah.
we kind of got narrow. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, I wanna thank you. This was awesome, and I can talk about this stuff, I feel like, as you can too, forever, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad we hit all those touch points.
yeah. Definitely, we can definitely do other talks where we're just like hitting just on one specific thing as well, besides fascia and practice.
Totally, yeah, I love that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, this is going to post on our account, so everyone who didn't make it can go watch it.
Awesome. Thank you
Thanks.
all. Thank you, Dr. Joe.
Thanks,
Have a
Hannah.
great rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
And I'm going to pause this one.